Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are, and welcome to the team mission presentations of the inaugural interactive space program of the International Space University, the expedition ISP20. My name is Göktuğ Karacaloğlu. I am the program director of the ISP, and it is my great pleasure today to be the master of ceremony of this prestigious event and address you from the ISP Mission Operations Center, located at the ISU Central Campus in Strasbourg, France. As many of you, I believe, followed, we had started this expedition 5 weeks ago, where our 86 crew members from 30 countries have been virtually launched to their 3 space habitats: on Earth orbit, on the Moon, and on Mars. During this 5-week duration, the expedition crew altogether was tasked to work on a single project, which we call a team mission, which required them to explore how space can help in the monitoring, preparedness, mitigation, and prevention of the next pandemic. Well, it is always a challenge, but also, I should say, an amazing learning opportunity to work with diverse and international teams, where you have language barriers, different cultural norms, and you have to address different levels of experience. As part of such a team, it is your responsibility to hear the voice of each individual and learn together, which our team definitely succeeded. But this year, the challenge was even much greater, since each of our crew members was only virtually connected to the rest of the expedition team. And if that was not enough, they all have been operating on very, very different time zones. That is, for the 5 last weeks, ladies and gentlemen, some of our crew members have been starting their days as early as 2 a.m. local time in their mornings. And I believe this group currently calls themselves the West Siders. So well done, guys. In such a challenging context, I am extremely proud that our 86 crew members have done a fantastic job and produced 3 very high quality reports and 1 executive summary to address how space assets and technologies can help with the next pandemic. In the meantime, here, by the way, on Earth at the ISP Mission Operations Center, we have tried our best to support them with many supplementary activities, including daily seminars, interactive workshops, and mission-specific trainings and activities. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank the amazing team of team mission commanders and officers we had. We have planned and supported the journey of this team mission with all of these people, and they have been working really for almost 4 months for this. So our sincere appreciations in this context goes to Farhan Asrar, who is the mission commander, Leo Bo, the mission officer, Pete Warden, the orbit commander, Rishi Khan and Dylan O'Reilly, the orbit officers, Gary Martin, the moon commander, Paul Liffey and Camilo Reyes, the moon officers, Scott Schneider and Liang Chen, the Mars commanders, and Nate Taylor, the Mars officers. And also, of course, all the other commanders that we had and the officers and all the experts, the subject matter experts, the instructors for the workshops, who have made an incredibly valuable contribution to this team mission work that we will watch today. So today, on their last day of Expedition ISP20 at their celestial habitat, let me say, we will be tuning in and listening to each habitat team as they walk us through a summary of their analysis, findings, and recommendations. So, and maybe a quick note here on what to expect. As part of ISP curriculum, we many times emphasize the importance of storytelling and public outreach. So basically to get your message across to your selected audience, let me say. In that regard, we have explicitly asked our teams to demonstrate this learning as part of their final team mission presentations. That is why what we will hear, they will present now, will possibly be not a 1 hour, let me say, a PowerPoint presentation, but rather a more interactive session where our Habitat teams will use the power of the media technology available to them. So, on my second screen, I can already see the two representatives of Expedition ISP20, Chris and Mei Li, excitedly waiting for me to pass the floor on to them, which I will do in a minute. But before that, I would like to also acknowledge our main sponsor of this team mission, Lockheed Martin Corporation. Without their generous support, none of these work and collaboration would have been possible. I would like to also extend my thanks and appreciation to our 16 very distinguished guests who are with us at the moment and following the presentation. And soon, in an hour, we'll be challenging our crew members with their questions at the very end. So let me go through the list very quickly. We have here with us today Dimitri Stafodi, the research and teaching staff from the Leiden University. We have Tanya Masson-Zwan, the Associate Professor and Deputy Director of International Institute of Air and Space Law of Leiden University. We have Lucy Stoyak, the Director General of HEC Montreal. We have Walter Peters, the Professor in Space Business and Management and President Emeritus of International Space University. We have Mike Simpson, also former President of ISU and Director Emeritus of Secure World Foundation. We have Ofer Lapid, the founder and CTO of Space Nest. We have Chiara Menflati, the president of Portugal Space Agency. We have Val Mansumi, the chief executive officer of SANSA, the South African National Space Agency. We have Andiswa Milsa, the managing director of Earth Observations of SANSA, the South African National Space Agency. We have Francois Spiro, the manager of strategic foresight at CNES, French Space Agency. We have Christophe Lasseur, the project manager at ESA Aztec's Life and Physical Sciences and Life Support section. We have Su Yin Tan, the director of Applied Geomatics Research Laboratory of University of Waterloo, Canada. We have Juan de Dalmau, the president of International Space University. We have Richard Chen, the CEO and co-founder of Mindsight.io. We have Jonathan Clark, the assistant professor of neurology and space medicine, Baylor College of Medicine. We have Alejandro Roman, the general director of Aerospace Department of the Paraguay Space Agency. And we have Pilar Zamaro Averbento, the executive director of Colombian Space Agency. So welcome you all, and definitely we will be very excited to receive your questions. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to pass the floor to our ISP outpost in space, where Chris and Mei Li will moderate the rest of the presentation. So Chris and Mei Li, over to you.
Solid copy, Mission Command. I'm reading you loud and clear. Greetings, planet Earth, wherever you may be. The ISP 2020 crew is on its way home. My name is Chris.
And I'm Mei Li.
And both of us are happy to welcome everyone to our presentation of the International Space University's Interactive Space Program 2020.
This program has brought 84 students from 30 different countries across numerous disciplines together over a 5-week period to expand their knowledge of space. They dug into the challenge of pandemics and how space solutions may help in the present and in the future.
Our crew has been divided into 3 mission teams distributed across 3 different space habitats, each of which with a specific focus in their research. Team Orbit. Team Orbit have had the mission to focus on utilizing space technology and satellites to monitor current and future pandemics, as well as monitoring changes and risk factors that can be associated with pandemics. Team Moon. Team Moon have had the mission to investigate how space technology and satellites can assist in preventing future pandemics and assist in better preparedness during the current pandemic and those to come in the future. And finally, Team Mars. Team Mars have had the mission to investigate how space can help mitigate the current COVID-19 pandemic and mitigate the added effects of the crisis, as well as ideas to mitigate future pandemic crises.
But our crew has not only been sent into outer space. We have been sent 100 years into the future to year 2120, to a time where humanity has established itself across the stars, orbit, the moon, Mars, and who knows, maybe further beyond. Can you imagine the message those colonies of the future would send back to us if possible? What knowledge and technology may they possess that could help us here and now on Earth?
This has been our mission. Here in the distant future, across distant worlds, our crews will build that 2120 mindset and learn the ideas that only the future can bring. We aim to take these ideas and bring them back to Earth here in 2020. Future ideas, here today, applicable to humanity now and critical to our future as a species.
At this moment in time, as the crew make their long journey back to Earth, we receive dedicated transmissions from each habitat. These transmissions give us a highlight about what they have learned during the ISP mission.
And I believe that our first transmission is coming through now. It appears to be from Team Moon, looking at preparing for and preventing pandemics. Let's get you on screen.
Hello, and greetings from the lunar habitat. Yes, as you mentioned, the Moon team looked at prevention and preparedness. Our prevention team is broken up into early stage prevention and late stage prevention, where early stage prevention is looking to make sure that there are no community outbreaks of these viruses. That's done through situational awareness as well as advanced research. Next, our late stage prevention group is looking to make sure that if we do have community outbreaks, they don't spread and become pandemics or epidemics. Next, we'll move on to our preparedness team that's going to look at how nations and organizations can be as prepared as possible using space technologies for any outbreaks of pandemics. Finally, we're going to wrap up all of our ideas with our legal team, who's going to look at each of our ideas and make sure that they're not infringing on any human rights. But without further delay, let's talk to Team Moon.
Thanks, Ben. The primary prevention from a pandemic consists in avoiding the offspring of new pandemic pathogens and react to the first infections before the outbreak. For this reason, we found the medical situation awareness a key concept that could help us in this effort. MSA combines a worldwide coverage and different sources of information to evaluate health events in the context of person, place, and time, in order to respond quickly to emerging threats. But what are we looking at with these systems? The Black Death, swine flu, Ebola, COVID-19, and much more. Most of the viruses responsible for the pandemics are zoonotics. They mutate in animals and then transmit to humans, a process which is called spillover. In order to reduce the offspring of such viruses, we should build a healthier contact between humans and the wildlife, which is nowadays threatened by a stressed ecosystem. To combine these aspects, Earth observation systems are fundamentals. Earth observation systems are in the sky from the 70s, with Landsat first, but in the last years we have seen a great growth in the satellite market and in the number of these systems. Imaging technology as well has improved, and nowadays daily information of places once unreachable are available. The sensor can capture information ranging from temperature to humidity, from light emissions to water and air pollution. Combining all of this information, one can foresee the distribution of the species that are likely to transmit viruses, and the human activity as well, hence detecting possible outbreak risks. While already plenty of data are collected by these satellites, only a fraction is analyzed and used. In order to act effectively, we need a global collection of data and a fast, continuous analysis of these assets. This can be done with the implementation of algorithms and studying the relation between data and virus diffusion. Our first recommendation, hence, to the international community is to increase this monitoring potential. Many countries are funding health and space researchers addressing vaccine development, green technologies, and much more. Part of this funding could be addressed to Earth observation and data analysis. Moreover, the consolidation of the space industry itself benefits directly the accuracy and variety of data available, as well as the tools for their analysis. The second recommendation we have is the creation of a charter under the administration of UNUSA and as part of the Spider Network that could collaborate with the World Health Organization. Using space data, epidemiologic experience, and a global political influence, this charter could do much. This committee could monitor high-risk areas and act in accord to local government to prevent the very next pandemics. And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Thanks, Jacopo. Yes, situational awareness is very important. Next, let's turn it to Maria. Maria, how can advanced research help with pandemic prevention?
Great question, Ben. Let me tell you about it. Research in the International Space Station provides an advanced testing ground for rapid growth of microbial systems related to infectious disease. Here we are talking about population growth rate, violence response, and resistance of pathogens. Rapid growth of viral and bacterial systems in microgravity can produce faster mutations and increased violence. A better understanding of the pathogenic evolution of viruses and bacteria helps us to advance our knowledge and capacity to respond to viral spreads, outbreaks, and developing treatments and vaccines. This is particularly important in RNA viruses like COVID-19, since they have a high degree of mutation. Bacteria and viruses are always interacting with fluids, and it has been shown that common areas of infection in the human body are areas with low fluid shears, such as the lungs, for example. Because of that, microgravity is very attractive to study bacteria and viruses, since it is the ultimate low shear environment. In fact, it is believed that a low shear environment is a reason behind antibiotic resistance. Therefore, we recommend more baseline studies on pathogenic evolution research in microgravity environments conducted at the International Space Station or other platforms. So to generate high-quality data, specifically data related to global pandemics. In addition, we recommend making available the data from the studies to the public in an open data initiative to increase international cooperation and transparency. We understand that different sectors from industry can benefit from doing microgravity research. However, we need to reduce the costs and increase access to research opportunities in space. We believe that new space actors, such as SpaceX, have the potential to provide more launch opportunities, opening up the space sector to more players. We also believe that it will be beneficial to provide incentives to pharmaceutical or biomedicine companies toward research, allowing for property rights while simultaneously allowing for releasing their datasets to the public. Of course, interacting with philanthropic actors like the Gates Foundation might be a pathway to acquire grants to study infectious disease for the prevention of pandemics. On that note, we recommend streamlining the process for fast access to the ISS, particularly for agencies and commercial companies researching pathogens and developing vaccines. To sum it up, advanced pathogen research in space can prepare us for pandemics through advancing our knowledge on microorganisms and immunology. Over to you, Ben.
That's great. Thanks, Maria. So that wraps up our early prevention section. Now, we need to make sure that we don't have a community outbreak turn into a pandemic. That is where our late stage prevention team comes in. I'm going to hand it over now to Paul to talk about that.
Thanks, Ben. Did you know that only half of the world's population has access to a reliable internet connection? This poor quality communication infrastructure leads to ineffective communication efforts in the event of any kind of crisis. And those particularly affected by this issue are those with limited accessibility or affordability, or women or minorities who may have their digital rights restricted in some places. Therefore, our first recommendation is to take advantage of the new generation of low Earth orbit broadband constellations that are currently being deployed. As an example, Starlink from SpaceX is expecting to be offering global coverage by the end of next year. This is going to open up remarkable new possibilities for teleeducation and telemedicine. Now, ubiquitous satellite-based teleeducation is going to give a new way for global health authorities to communicate directly with billions of people. This healthcare education can be symptoms to look out for, management measures, treatment possibilities, even hygiene, such as how to effectively sterilize water or correctly store and prepare food, even things like social distancing. It can also provide localized insights into the potential for outbreaks of vector-borne diseases and how to best prevent them. The same constellations also open up a way for rapid telemedicine into even the most isolated parts of the world. Doctors will be able to communicate directly with patients, utilizing local cultural insights and language to ensure that their medical advice is neither misconstrued nor misunderstood. This will allow for a much more localized control of the outbreak and stop its geographical spread. Back to you, Ben.
Thank you, Paul. It looks like another aspect that your group has for late-stage prevention is rapid response. Benita, can you describe what rapid response is and how we can use space technologies to achieve it?
Thanks, Ben, for this question. Now, rapidly addressing the primary term of rapid response in your question. Rapid response in case of pandemics refers to the immediate measures that can be taken when the event occurs. Just like responding to the flooding situations with the help of a disaster responsive strategy. For example, evacuation of people in case of floods. Similarly, in case of pandemics, we need to have a response strategy ready. Although the response strategy should have a pre-response strategy or a backup plan. So GIS is one such technology that contributes to this pre-response strategy and helps to get ourselves ready to respond to pandemics strategically. So GIS particularly helps in linking the ground data to maps and creating databases. These maps are real-time, kind of live in nature, and can be updated as per changes on the ground. And therefore, as a pre-response strategy, our team has proposed to use GIS to have a database ready, which includes information of all the healthcare centers at the zonal level. It also includes the information about the facilities that they are equipped with. Also, there is a new function in GIS, that is the network analysis function, which can be implemented to have a simulation of all the routes that can be traveled by the ambulances during emergencies. GIS also helps to keep a track of the containment zones and areas with infected patients. Marking out buffer zones around the containment zones is also possible in GIS. This particularly gives us insights about areas which have a potential threat to humans. All these functionalities of GIS help the local governmental authorities to take sound decisions based on real ground information and prepare for the rapid response accordingly and strategically. Now, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. Now let's move from prevention to preparedness. Guillermo, how can we make sure that space technologies can be used to prepare countries and organizations for pandemics?
Thank you, Ben. That is a very good question. Indeed, preparedness can be a very big part of the solution. We must also be ready to take on a pandemic if these prevention measures are not enough. The way we recommend countries to approach this challenge is by first reflecting upon quantifiable indicators that could allow them to evaluate their present preparedness of a pandemic. While not perfect, these sorts of indicators would allow countries to measure their effectiveness of their solutions towards being more prepared. Some examples of these indicators that we found could be improved with space technologies include the Global Health Security Index Preparedness Framework, citizen internet access, the WHO Public Health Emergency Assessment Indicators, and the foundation's financial contribution amounts. This then leads to 5 exciting use cases of space technologies to handle the pandemic preparedness. First, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen the impact of telemedicine, which we can make to those with internet access. We have all used this at some point, almost everyone. Telemedicine allows people to consult with doctors from the safety of their homes. Space assets have already played a huge role in providing internet access to the world. And by adding to that infrastructure, we continue to bring more people online and take advantage of telemedicine. The second use case is telemaintenance. This is a combination of using space technologies to continue bringing the world online, as well as using space, spin-offs, environmental monitoring techniques to be able to track and intervene with water, transport, and production systems, to name a few. Third, we know those who are disabled or immunocompromised are the ones worst hit by pandemics. We need to continue innovating for them. Many space technologies, spin-offs from laser technology to astronaut support, can be used for disability support in ways such as allowing visually impaired individuals to orient themselves in public and help implement basic hygienic routines. Fourth, we need to continue developing infrastructure to be prepared to assist in emergency situations that we must respond to quickly. Earth observation satellites allows us to monitor a situation as it unfolds and understand if a disease is present where it might be spreading to. Finally, many deadly diseases have been found to be zoonotic viruses, which were spread to humans through animals. By using satellite communications and animal housing monitoring systems, teleagriculture will allow us to minimize contact with disease-spreading animals.
That's great. A lot of awesome use cases there. But with any new technologies, we need to make sure that we take time to focus on the ethical and privacy concerns that they might bring up. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alice to talk about some of these ideas.
And most importantly, Ben, those use cases we just mentioned, as well as the baseline parameters for scientific research mentioned earlier, are both based on AI and data analytics, and as such raise important legal and ethical implications. First, we need to be aware of the fact that AI might become unethical. The question of ethics in AI was famously considered as early as 1942 by Russo-American scientist and writer Asimov when he developed his famous 3 laws of robotics. Concerning our use cases mentioned earlier, the main challenges in terms of ethical AI would be the potential for biases when the tools will be making computational decisions. Indeed, human designer might pass on their own biases unintentionally, or even try to manipulate those programs. And as a result, algorithms may treat particular geographical regions favorably or not. This aspect must be considered both as the development and application stages of any space technology using AI. Secondly, those proposed space technologies raise ethical issues relating to data collection, data analysis, and the dissemination of personal data and information. There is no global consensus on the conditions of the legality of the use of personal data. Some regions have taken a very proactive approach and set strict standards. Others have less stringent regulations or none at all. However, there is a consensus that rampant, illegitimate, and unproportioned collection of personal data poses threats to good governance and democratic practices. This is why, in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, the UN has highlighted the following risks of data and privacy violation in the context of the use of digital technologies. First, there is a risk of misuse of collected data by both authorized users and illegal hacking access to it. Second, there's a risk of infringement of rights as a result of the data collection, such as loss of privacy, discrimination, harassment. Based on this information, during a pandemic, the UN recommends that only data collected and processed for legitimate purposes can be used, and that it must be used in accordance with the principle of proportionality. That is, data collection should refrain from going beyond necessary identification to achieve the intended public health outcomes. And when possible, technologies should use aggregated, de-identified, or anonymized data.
Thank you, Alice. Well, that's a wrap from all of us here on the moon. Thank you so much for paying attention, and back to you, Earth.
Welcome back, Planet Earth. That was Team Moon. It appears our second transmission is ready to come through now, and it's from Team Orbit, looking at monitoring of pandemics. Tell us what you learned, Team Orbit.
Imagine you're up on the space station, floating in a zero-G vacation. You hear of commotion down on the ground, a nasty pandemic floating around. Mission Control says it's time to come back, but you aren't so sure. It sounds kind of whack.
In the Milky Way galaxy, approaching the planet Earth, we are now in Earth orbit. The year is 2020. There is a global pandemic. Governments across the world have struggled to combine their efforts to monitor the situation. The people are in lockdown. The economy is at risk of breaking.
Hey Carline, I would really like it if we could secure a future for the next generations, where we can monitor this pandemic using space technologies in a more efficient way.
This is Emily, Orbit crew member and researcher.
There are so many policies and decisions made around the world that will be better informed with space, which will improve quality of life and decrease health inequalities worldwide.
Yes, Emily, you're right. We need to find a way to share the value of space across all the disciplines and the globe.
This is Carline, Orbit crew member and researcher.
For example, space technology can improve the monitoring of the predictive factors, the spread and the consequences of epidemics and pandemics. Even more so, space and ground data can be fused and integrated for the benefit of public health.
Yeah, and you know what? Since the first remote sensing satellite was launched over 50 years ago, spaceborne remote sensing has advanced from small-scale production of low-resolution images to the daily acquisition of increasingly available high-resolution data information.
Yeah, the commercialization of space is one of the largest and rapidly growing sectors that is expected to be worth trillions of dollars over the next decade. As an example, the telecommunication sector generates revenue of over 100 billion euros per year.
That is a lot of money. But we also know that a major challenge during this pandemic concerns the global and equal distribution of data. Not many countries have access to space assets and robust ground infrastructure. Therefore, the collection, assimilation, and distribution of data is inconsistent across nations.
On top of that, we know that of the 5 international space agreements that form the core of outer space law, none specify health protection as an objective of space activities. Neither do they contain any reference to pandemics.
Yes, this is quite a task that we have ahead of us.
Well, there are some fantastic opportunities with the space sector growing. This seems to have the potential to empower all countries with access to high-quality data. It's a good thing this team was tasked with looking into overcoming these very challenges. Here's a little team inspiration that they made themselves.
জগৎ জুড়ে মৃত্যু সুরে থমকে দাঁড়িয়ে হাত ঘড়ি ফুরিয়ে আলো বিষেতে কালো আজকে মোদের চল ছবি পৃথিবী শেষে চাঁদের দেশে অজানা স্বাদের হাতছানি অঙ্ক দেখে যন্ত্র লেখে নতুন ভোরের রং তুলি
I'm glad I took a second to listen to that poem. I'd like to hear what the experts of the group have to say about identifying a new pandemic utilizing space technologies.
What we have learned is that when a pandemic arises, it is crucial to determine the nature of the disease, how it spread, and its transmission rates.
This is Mona, an expert in health and pandemics.
For COVID-19, technology to track human movement has been applied, and we know more about how it is transmitted. Space technologies have provided valuable information in the monitoring of this pandemic. However, the parameters measured by remote sensing today are not able to detect human symptoms of a pandemic.
Very true, Mona. And we see this with geographic information systems.
This is Melody, an expert in space data and technology.
GIS can be very effective in the monitoring of infectious diseases. It's offers a bird's eye view of all locations visited by infected individuals that can reveal the source of an outbreak and even highlight potential areas of concern before the outbreak has begun. Additionally, artificial intelligence is advancing to be able to automatically detect, classify, and recognize pandemics. But there's a lack of available real-time satellite data on a global scale, and there's a need to enhance data fusion technology so that satellite imagery can be used effectively to monitor pandemics.
Don't forget, though, that even if we have access to all the data in the world, its effectivity is reduced without a proper pandemic-focused international framework.
This is Justin, an expert in international policy.
We should encourage governments and leaders to collaborate in further developing infrastructure for global public health monitoring. One current example of this is reflected in regulations set by the WHO.
The who?
The World Health Organization, where they state every member shall notify the WHO if events with public health implications occur in their country. Another great example, specifically related to space-based monitoring, is the International Charter for Space and Major Disasters. Remember when we had the Ebola outbreak? The activation of the charter helped provide satellite imagery that helped map high-risk areas. Unfortunately, the charter definitions do not include outbreaks nor pandemics, so activating it for these types of situations is unclear.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great conversation about how space technologies are used to monitor a pandemic on Earth. I particularly enjoyed hearing about the positive advancements of artificial intelligence. Let's watch this lighthearted video of the orbit crew taking a well-earned break from their duties. Let's see how the experts are progressing.
Have you heard of the Copernicus Emergency Management Service? It's one of the international space-based monitoring initiatives and was activated for the monitoring of the COVID-19 outbreak and spread in Italy. The satellite imagery provided by Copernicus allowed decision makers to dynamically determine the best temporary healthcare site locations during the early phases of the spread and inform their decisions on which parks and markets to open based on local laws and population density after the spread had been slowed.
Equally as important, remote sensing allows us to learn a lot about the environmental, agricultural, economic effects and consequences that coincide with lockdowns associated with COVID-19. The EU dashboards show imagery from satellite remote sensing that can help us understand these consequences. The EU dashboard is an easily accessible website where you can select indicators and countries to use satellites to explore the impact of COVID-19 on countries.
Do not forget about the importance of global navigation and satellite communication, as they are as they are also being used to counter the COVID-19 crisis. These are not only support local decision makers, but they can also be a key part of tracking the spread of infectious diseases and provide access to service in isolated area or less accessible areas. It's a critical need for health professionals in remote areas to be able to use these technologies to communicate across health centers and provide up-to-date information on the spread of the diseases, recoveries, and rate of death. Space-based technologies are also used to track and locate people tapping into mobile location data. This can help reconstruct the movement of individuals who are potential positive cases of COVID-19. While useful, this has also raised discussion around the privacy of personal data.
You touch on a great point. On one hand, based on our discussion, it is evident that tracking the location and movement of populations is beneficial in tracing the spread of disease, epidemics, and pandemics. On the other hand, we have to take privacy rights into account. Geolocation data can be considered personal, and geospatial data is becoming very accurate. And I don't want my friend discovering that I went to the beach instead of helping him move.
What a friend you are. I, of all, understand about the issues related to data privacy. There's clearly a lot to consider, and it's a good thing that there are experts from healthcare, international policy, finance, and satellite engineering working together to consider these different aspects. It can take a while to process this type of challenge.
יום אחד אני אהיה בחלל, ארחף לי בכיף בלי דאגות בכלל. אסתכל מלמעלה על כדור הארץ המרשים, ממקום שבו אין הבחנה בין גבולות ואנשים. ואם במקרה תפרוץ בשנית מגפה, אעשה כל מה שאפשר בין הקפה להקפה. אצלם תמונות ואבצע ניטור ואנסה לכל אוכלוסיית העולם לעזור. אבל עד שאגיע לחלל הרחוק, אמשיך מכאן לספר, לשיר ולצעוק, עד שהמסר יעבור בין כולם, שאנחנו צריכים לשמור על עולמנו המושלם. גם אם נגיע לכוכבים אחרים, מחובתנו לשמור על כדור הארץ המדהים, לחשוב על הביוספירה כל כולה, ולא רק על טובתנו האישית והמהירה. אם נזכור זאת ונעביר לאחרים, כדור הארץ יישאר מקיים ונעים. עד כאן לאתגר החריזה, כאן טים אורביט נכונים למשימה.
So, it's clear we need to consider the issues of pandemics from a multidisciplinary perspective. But how do they achieve this in practice?
There are a lot of changes moving forward. As an example, we need to see positive changes in reliable global navigation satellite system coverage around the world. We also require advancement in technologies to be able to actively integrate space data from various sources, like multispectral, hyperspectral, infrared, microwave, LiDAR, SAR, etc., with knowledge we get from the ground. And there's the question of satellite data processing, which requires specialized image processing software and sufficient storage for that data, not to mention policy limitations.
And this is exactly why we need to foster national and international partnerships between policymakers, satellite providers, and scientists like remote sensing experts, public health professionals, and researchers. This partnership can lead to many different opportunities. Information can be exchanged, people can get more interdisciplinary training and understanding. Global adaptation of the One Health concept would contribute to addressing this. This can be seen with the NASA Health and Equality Program, which employs public health experts that directly collaborate together with the Center of Disease Control in the United States.
You can actually scale that concept up even higher, all the way to the international level. I mentioned earlier the International Charter. The activation of this charter connects countries in crisis to crucial space-based monitoring data for the purposes of public health. This charter currently focuses on natural disasters, but could be expanded or even possibly mirrored into a new charter, such that infectious diseases, epidemics, and pandemics could get put into the monitoring spotlight. This increase in scope can also help us focus on achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, as a target for 2030.
Speaking of which, the United Nations defined the Sustainable Development Goals as a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet. for now and into the future. There are 17 of them, and they all go hand in hand. The Sustainable Development Goals highlight the importance of a strategic and integrated approach to address the biggest challenge in the world, including poverty, climate change, and inequality. And did you know that there's an initiative called Space for SDGs, showing how space technologies can help achieve all of them?
That sounds wonderful, but focusing on the here and now, I think we can all agree that the current pandemic has highlighted even more clearly the need to prioritize improving health and education and spurring economic growth in these areas. And Earth observation monitoring can play an important role in achieving this.
Well said. We've talked about the public health benefits of Earth observation monitoring. But what about its economic growth benefits? Joint efforts between space agencies and private companies can support the resilience and growth of the space monitoring sector. And investments in new space will push the sector to achieving new heights, improving its economic traceability, and facilitating its financing. With this approach, there's nowhere to go but up.
Even through hardships, there is nowhere to go but to the stars. The recommendation to adopt the monitoring of infectious diseases, epidemics, and pandemics into the Charter for Natural Disasters is certainly of value.
La mirada de les constel·lacions. Ulls de l'espai sobre la Terra, acariciats fugaçment pel vent prim i fi, que amb una mirada delicada totes les meravelles del planeta podeu cobrir. Cavallers lluents i ferms, amb llur aparença daurada, englotint bilions de fotons, rebosant d'energia sota llurs cuirasses. És allà on es troba el més preuat tresor, aquell d'una imatge, d'un pensament, del nostre punt blau i pàl·lid, donant-nos el més vell sentiment. Veure la Terra en el seu conjunt, sense diferències, sense fronteres, apreciant tots els seus relleus i tots els seus punts, i amb l'esperança que per mil·lennis quedarà sencera.
Seems as though the transmission is not quite over. Let's circle back to some of the research team members to get their final assessment on their hard work.
Our ISP mission to understand how space technology can be utilized in the monitoring of pandemics has shown us that space data plays a vital role during these crisis times. We can track human movement with location data through mobile phones and air traffic. And by using Earth observation satellites, we can observe how typical routine activities, such as driving to work or farming crops, change over time. We can use satellite imagery to help map high-risk areas, and geographic information systems can display a bird's-eye view of all locations visited by infected individuals, identifying the source of an outbreak. Additionally, artificial intelligence is being developed to be able to automatically detect, classify, and recognize pandemics.
Pandemics can also be indirectly monitored through space-based imagery and the systematic observation and review of the situation on Earth. The best location for temporary healthcare sites can be selected using satellite imagery. The consequences of social measures to reduce the spread of a pandemic can be seen, and the Earth observation dashboard can help us to understand how the effects on the environment, agriculture, and the economy impact countries. Health professionals can also use global navigation satellite systems and satellite communications to communicate up-to-date information on the spread of a disease. There is strong justification for a global policy that balances the use of geolocation and geospatial data to specifically help detect and monitor current and future pandemics with the protection of personal and high-quality data to respect individual rights.
Our recommendations encourage sustainable development of space technologies and ground infrastructures for worldwide monitoring of pandemics. Our recommendation to advance technologies that can actively integrate multiple space data types with ground data, including economic data, agriculture, and the environment, supports SDG 2, Zero Hunger. Our recommendation to expand or mirror the International Charter Space and Major Disasters supports SDG 3, Good Health and Well-being. Our recommendation to have reliable global navigation satellite systems coverage around the world, including robust ground infrastructure in every country, supports SDG 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Our recommendation for global satellite connectivity for medical professionals and for equal access to training and resources for space operations, satellite data processing, and storage supports SDG 10 to reduce inequality within and among countries. Our recommendation to foster national and international partnerships between space agencies and private companies, and between policymakers, satellite providers, and scientists to share data and support the resilience and growth of the space monitoring sector supports SDG 17, partnerships to achieve the goal.
These recommendations encourage peace and prosperity for people and the planet, for now and into the future. And this is all in line with the first article of the Outer Space Treaty, which states that the use of space shall be carried out for the benefit and in the interest of all countries, irrespective of their degree of economic or scientific development.
Fantastic. We've reached the end of the team's transmission. I hope you have enjoyed their talk as much as I have. I'd like to take a moment to invite you to reflect on what your key takeaway is. How can these recommendations impact you? What can you do to help with the impact of these recommendations? My takeaway? Well, I'll say this. Remote sensing, without borders, seems like a good place to start. Oh, and I never properly introduced myself. My name is Tamir, and I am the AI aboard the spaceship housing the first ever ISU space-based university in the year 2120. It has been my pleasure to be your narrator for this journey through the monitoring of pandemics from outer space relevant to your time.
Now that you're back, it's time for our final transmission. It's just come through now. Here is Team Mars looking at the mitigation of pandemics. On screen.
Mars is far away. Future Martian colonists will be on their own for any problem to deal with, so if a pandemic were to break out at a future outpost, its mitigation would be key. Inhabitants would need to manage without outside help. The future aside, we have a pandemic on our hands now in the 21st century. Thus far, we have seen efforts to prevent and monitor pandemics, but how can space solutions be used to mitigate the pandemic of today? We've identified 5 key issues and with accompanying space-based solutions that can play key roles in mitigating global outbreaks of disease. We have asked our experts to shed some light on each of these subjects in this transmission. Space-enabled solutions can help to monitor and streamline logistics here on Earth. With these capabilities, we can support critical infrastructure from space, like healthcare and education, especially during emergencies.
Our society's critical infrastructure is especially important during an emergency like a pandemic. Supplies for the healthcare sector, providing education and regular disinfecting services are just a few examples of critical infrastructure required during a pandemic, where maintaining physical distance is very challenging. To address this issue, we can apply space assets and technologies to automate this process. For the healthcare sector, drones can be used to deliver healthcare supplies, such as personal protective equipment or PPE and blood for transfusions to remote clinics. Drones, which can rapidly deliver essentials without the need for human interaction, depend on space technologies such as mobile connectivity, satellite communications, and navigation for route planning. In the future, a drone delivery system could play a key role in health service supply chains. Another way to preserve public health is the automated medical kiosk. They could perform for temperature checks and distribute face masks and sanitizers. This kiosk can be used to identify suspected COVID-19 cases as well as store and transmit data on PPE purchase. This data could be used to develop Geographical Information Systems or GIS to map COVID-19 hotspots and areas of high demand for PPE. On the other hand, autonomous vehicles operated using GPS and satellite communications could also be used to maintain critical infrastructure. They could perform disinfection duties as well as the delivery of medical and food supplies. For these self-driving vehicles, a geofencing system can be used with the help of GPS and local radio frequency identifiers to find the locations of shops, restaurants, and food banks. Satellite communications are similarly leading the global mitigation effort. Due to worldwide lockdowns, many people, including students, are now working from home. UNESCO has launched its Global Education Coalition to popularize remote learning through the use of satellite communications. In efforts to combat boredom and stress, video streaming services have become very popular during COVID-19 crisis. However, solutions like this require a reliable internet service which only available in certain locations. New satellite constellations such as Starlink aim to connect the remote areas to the internet. Space-enabled autonomous disinfecting robots and delivery vehicles are all promising solutions using space-enabled capabilities to automate critical infrastructure and mitigate the impacts of pandemics.
Another aspect we took into account is the remote delivery of healthcare. Usually this is considered for physically remote locations, but in a lockdown situation, every location has in fact become remote.
The COVID-19 crisis has put healthcare systems under immense stress in every affected country. Panic buying of personal protective equipment or PPE has led to shortages in hospitals, endangering patients and frontline healthcare workers that run essential health services. Remote healthcare already allows some to function without direct physical contact or putting anyone at risk, reducing the demand for precious PPE. Unfortunately, the protective umbrella is not a universal one. Remote areas with limited access to internet are prone to disproportionately be affected by pandemics. The pre-existing disparity, a self-rolling cycle, leads to an increase in the demand for healthcare services and frontline workers in these isolated communities. This is where space can help. The capacity to reach remote areas with broadband connectivity will mark the ability of healthcare workers to conduct remote services, coordinate deliveries, and communicate with these disaffected communities. The implementation of such a system would benefit from synergies with recent developments in modern medicine and telemedicine, and current efforts to establish global satellite-based internet connectivity. Of course, a remote diagnosis based on a cursory examination or questionnaire can only diagnose patients with obvious symptoms and prognosis. In the case of COVID-19, studies have shown that asymptomatic carriers can also transmit the virus. The use of teleconsulting will decrease the risk of asymptomatic carriers infecting others. It will also allow doctors to see more patients overall and better serve those in dire need of their assistance. Another angle where space could support the mitigation of pandemics is in analog technology transfer. Biomonitoring technologies such as those used in spacesuits and on the ISS, real-life simulations for the medical training of astronauts, and space-based robotics like NASA's Robonaut could each be transferred relevant to terrestrial applications. They would greatly enhance mitigation efforts through their support of diagnosis, treatment, and reduction in patient visit times. Further conveniently, these applications also strive to resolve United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 3, good health and well-being, and 11, sustainable cities and communities. Space solutions, including satellite telemedical connectivity or space spin-offs offering increased autonomy, will significantly support the mitigation of pandemics.
The limitations created by lockdown measures extend far beyond healthcare. Space-based technologies can be invaluable to decision makers' planning.
Without proper planning and implementation, measures taken to quell the spread of infection can be inconvenient or even deadly. It is critical to ensure that decision makers have a logistical infrastructure in place to support mass population movements and can make well-informed trade-offs between public health and the economy. Space-based solutions are well equipped to help. The world is rapidly becoming more connected. Nearly half of the global population now has access to the internet through mobile devices. Governments can leverage this far-reaching infrastructure to monitor and control the effects of lockdown with smartphone-based tracking and contact tracing applications enabled by global navigation systems or local Bluetooth signal exchanges. Many of these networks have already been deployed by agencies. When combined with GIS, Geographical Information Systems, these applications can be used to identify areas with high rates of infection and notify users if they may have had exposures with a geofence or virtual perimeter. Essential workers and services require assured mobility even during lockdowns. GIS can identify viable transportation channels and ensure they are functioning. In the hands of governments, they could even be used to streamline transportation operations and consequently reduce the economic impacts of human separation and isolation. GIS can also aid the public in the rapid location of essential resources and services for those in need, from healthcare to groceries on a local scale. Such a solution would maintain a live index of location-specific supply and demand, allowing governments to make decisive allocations. While implementing this solution, it will also be imperative to consider the privacy and protection of participants in their data, as well as to ensure that this powerful toolset remain in trusted hands. The analysis of space-based data and its integration into terrestrial applications presents novel opportunities for decision makers in time of crisis. Secure transmission and transportation channel will allow for decision makers to adequately provide critical resources and information to the public. This will maximize personal freedoms within the constraints imposed by lockdowns.
We are now all feeling the full force of the economic slowdown that is happening. At the same time, the delivery of goods is essential to a smoothly running society.
In the uncertain times of a pandemic, the normal functioning of the global supply chain system is disrupted, as through the process of globalization, supply chains have become more interdependent. Thus, if one component of this system is affected, this poses the risk of a global disruption. Possible solutions may lie in the application of Earth observation and ground data. Potential alternatives involve the in situ production of goods and the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, known as UAVs. Let me walk you through these possibilities. First, to address supply chain problems, a satellite-based tracking system similar to the one used to track vessels can be used to track goods in real time anywhere in the world. Data from the tracking system can subsequently be combined with geographical information systems, known as GIS, from Earth observation satellites, helping to identify viable transportation routes and map areas experiencing sudden rises in demand. This will ensure effectively managed supplies without risking blockages caused by transport and travel restrictions. Not only can the combined data of Earth observation and GIS identify blockages, they can also anticipate them, allowing for more effective triage and a reallocation of critical goods to areas of high demand. Second, the in situ production of goods is another approach to mitigate supply chain issues. It allows a fast and sufficient provision and distribution of goods within regions, neighborhoods, and households. Based on technologies developed for space, this in situ production can be realized through rapidly building units from scratch, reconfiguring existing factories, or the use of 3D printing to reduce local dependencies on the global supply chain. Finally, to ensure a fast and more reliable delivery of goods, automated UAV-based systems can be used to address traffic congestions on the ground. These UAV systems will operate with the assistance of positional information from Earth observation satellites. Although restrictions due to security or ethical reasons apply in many countries, the services offered by UAVs have already been successfully used in the United Arab Emirates, with others planning to follow this example. In summary, Earth observation in combination with ground data can be used to efficiently reallocate goods wherever they are needed. Additionally, local production of goods using space-inspired technologies and the delivery of supplies with UAVs provide other viable opportunities. Space-based solutions carry with them the great potential to mitigate supply chain disruptions due to pandemics.
Over the last few months, we've seen a wave of new solutions positioned to tackle the emotional and mental health problems that occur as a result of social isolation. Let's take a look at one unique space-enabled example.
Over the past 5 weeks, working within the ISU community, you're reminded that we can be one world, united in our goals. We're a group brought together by our love for and engagement with space. And the Interactive Space Program 2020 has done this for us. It's been an inspiration to create an app that we believe could help humanity a great deal with the current pandemic. During this pandemic, many have felt social isolation, negatively impacting their emotional health, and the solidarity of humankind has been challenged. To a greater extent, we see divisions between and within countries. It's a challenge to conquer a common enemy such as the coronavirus. As astronauts look back and see the Earth, a delicate blue orb floating in space, they describe what they call the overview effect, a profound recognition that we're all together in our goals and never alone. We're united as humankind on a home which has no borders. So, we propose an app called Starship Earth, which will put this unifying force, the overview effect, in the hands and pockets of everyone via a social network platform. The name is a reminder that we're one crew on a starship we know as Earth. The app will provide video and VR views from space and allow individuals to place their unique pictures at the location on the globe, interact with one another, and even share their own artistic creations. However, the social media market is extremely competitive, so the team has made a pivot towards a group that space has inspired for many generations, children and students.
Children are now facing the same impacts of social isolation, creating the emotional problems we have mentioned, along with a growing concern about the quality of their education. Recognizing these challenges for our youth, our team proposed a version of Starship Earth that agencies around the Earth could embrace, focused on students. Keeping in mind the importance of engagement and gamification of any platform built for kids, this app will provide students with an immersive, interactive environment that encourages learning. It also will ensure the privacy of the child through the use of avatars. The Starship Earth app would still provide the overview effect with the students' avatars, along with famous space locations and historical figures. In addition, the app will encourage physical activities through what we call spacewalks. They will allow the student to select a virtual orbit, their own galactic adventure, through which they would progress as they walk. Throughout their journey, they will learn the science and history of the space objects they pass. And at the end of the day, they will go into orbit with those who traveled a similar distance. These spacewalks will truly bring the cosmos to life, as a student will be able to go out and look at the night sky. They will not only learn about and collect the celestial landmarks they see, but with augmented reality, also view exactly where their avatar has traveled in its orbit. Essential to the platform is the element of education. Space agencies around the world have created many educational resources, and they often are looking for new educational tools. We believe this app will provide a unified learning platform, helping to build a common goal for space learning and exploration. Live events will allow the student to meet famous space figures, further helping to inspire the next generation of scientists and explorers. After completion of their coursework, students will become graduates of International Space Elementary. No doubt an exciting moment in their academic course. Throughout their learning adventures, students will be able to collect patches, pins, and awards, each helping them reach their ultimate goal, obtaining a virtual ticket for their avatar to fly on an actual future vehicle launch. Can you imagine the excitement these children would experience?
And we have liftoff. We would like to welcome aboard our exceptional 29,979 students from over 186 countries whose avatars will fly on this mission. These students have trained for the past several months through their coursework to be fellow explorers on this mission.
While we come from diverse backgrounds, the ISP20 Mars team shares a common bond through our love for space. Likewise, Starship Earth is a platform that will encourage solidarity through space. Starship Earth is an interactive platform providing a real-world immersion, encouraging physical activity, and captivating the hearts and minds of students through a comprehensive and engaging space curriculum.
Space-enabled solutions are key to mitigating many of the challenges facing us today due to pandemics. These include using space to automate critical infrastructure, expanding remote healthcare delivery, monitoring populations and informing decision-makers, countering impacts on supply chains, and solving mental health challenges due to isolation using space-themed solutions. To mitigate the effects of pandemics and encourage worldwide collaboration, it is recommended a dedicated charter focused on pandemics be developed. This would be housed within the United Nations Platform for Space-Based Information for Disaster Management and Emergency Response Network. Countries could activate this charter, through which members could organize international mitigation efforts via the sharing of satellite data and other relevant space resources. In addition, the Charter could promote research into new mitigation techniques for future pandemics. We'll conclude this series here, having shown an array of space-enabled solutions that can help to mitigate both the current COVID-19 pandemic and those to come.
Welcome back for the final time. We've just heard from all 3 mission habitats and have discovered the research that they have produced.
Right, Chris. To summarize, pandemics affect us all, regardless of who we are. Humanity needs to work together to monitor and mitigate the current pandemic, as well as prevent and prepare ourselves for future ones. One of the ways we can do this is by using geographic information systems, as well as Earth observation and crowdsourced data to create predictive models. As for healthcare infrastructure, we need to automate as much as possible, facilitate communication potentially through multi-system satellite constellation, and further develop telemedicine. From space, we can produce many spin-off technologies that will help us in the face of a pandemic. For example, global navigation satellite systems can assist drone piloting, pathogenic research may be enhanced in microgravity, disease monitoring may be improved for combining Earth observation and ground data, and pioneering ISS medical technology can be made available for use on Earth. Most importantly, we should work together for policies and partnerships to promote international collaboration. In the face of pandemics, we need to share any and all information gathered through space means between both spacefaring and non-spacefaring nations. Finally, multilateral space agencies could lead in building, strengthening, and amending policy frameworks at an international level.
Thank you, Meili, for the summary, and thank you for your attendance. We hope you all enjoyed our presentation and I wish you all a good day wherever you may be on Earth. We will now be moving on to any questions you may have.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was a wonderful summary of your teamwork. Chris, Meili, and of course, all the members of the Habitats Moon, Orbit, and Mars. Well done. So I don't know if anyone else, by the way, feel the same, but as watching your presentation, I really felt, even you before you mentioned that, the overview effect with all the interculturality and the poems and basically really getting seeing the Earth without borders. So very well done. I mean, we were really touched by our presentation of each of the teams. So as you mentioned, it is time indeed to move on to the questions, and I'm sure our experts are ready with their questions, and you are excited to receive them. But what I want to really do is I'm just checking the time here. So we are at 10 minutes to 3 p.m. here. So I recommend we take a 10-minute break here to refresh for the concentration and well-being of everyone. And we reconvene here at 3 p.m. And continue with the Q&A session. So everyone, let's see each other in 10 minutes. Signing off for now. everyone. And I would like to once again thank all the teams, all the three teams for their fantastic job. And now it's the challenge time. It's the Q&A time. As we announced, we have a lot of assessors with us. And also, I'm supposing that there will be more questions from the audience on YouTube as well. So the Q&A session will be moderated by one of our crew members. Hussein, if you can hear me, actually, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in this amazing transmission. We are glad that you have participated and watched us. For today's question and answer period, I will be your moderator, and I will announce the question assessor who will be asking the question. And once that is asked, we will be transferring the floor to the crew members. So our first question assessor of the day is Tanya. Tanya, floor is over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, evening, morning to everyone. I hope you can hear me properly. It's a pleasure to join the crew today to be with this final presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to you all and learned a lot, actually, and I admire also your presentation skills. I'm just checking if we ask questions to specific teams or in general.
We could do questions to specific teams.
Well, maybe I will keep a general question, because this is something that I was wondering for all the habitats similarly. Many of you did make reference to the Charter on Disaster, Charter on Major Disasters that exists since 20 years or so, that provides data in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. And that is a cooperation between space agencies, as you have presented properly. One of you mentioned that currently pandemics are not covered by the disaster charter. It is really more about natural phenomena such as floods, tsunamis, and so on. Several of you have suggested the idea to expand the charter, the current charter, or to create a new charter to deal also with pandemics. And you have actually some of you even proposed to expand the tasks of such a charter to research in addition to providing data. Some of you suggested that such a charter could be managed by the UN under the UN Spider program. I'm quite interested to hear a little bit more about the feasibility of this idea. As you know, the current charter is a cooperation of agencies. It's not an intergovernmental instrument. It is an instrument of space agencies, national and international ones. How could we really expand this idea? Is it the best idea to create an entirely new charter, or is it indeed an option to expand the current charter? But how could we then elevate that to a state level? I don't know who would like to answer this question, but perhaps those of the habitats that have addressed this as an idea could a little bit elaborate on their idea in this sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, for that question. I will pass over the floor to Janet, who is our expert in charter. Janet, if you'd like to take the floor.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an expert. It was born out of one of the seminars that we had, they talked about the disaster charter and how that worked. And I just thought, wouldn't this be a great idea for a pandemic, applying the same principles as the charter? Because I worked as a key worker for the UK government during the COVID, when it was at its height, and we were buying PPE, and it was just such a mess for all nations, not just the UK, but all nations were fighting over the PPE that was made by China, and we were all trying to get it into our countries, and we're all trying to address our own shortages. And it just seemed, can we do this in a better way? And maybe the charter is the better way, maybe it's not, but it's just an idea that was born out of having that seminar that was on how disasters were managed and how agencies could go on behalf of countries that weren't members of the charter to get the information. So everybody on the globe had access to the charter, and communication was a particular issue during COVID, especially I gather in some of the more underdeveloped countries. It was pretty poor in developed countries, to be honest with you. So it was just about how we could harness how the disaster charter works and transfer it either to a new charter. I think we said a new charter because it is a pandemic. It doesn't happen as often or seemingly as often at the moment as disasters, but also it brings it sort of unifies people and it brings it together, and you get people from all over the world going to help in the disasters, and that's kind of what I was thinking is, can we do something that's better coordinated across the globe to deal with the pandemic? That was just how I saw it.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. It is, of course, an attractive idea. It's just that, of course, when you have an idea, you also have to be realistic how it could be implemented. And once again, the current disaster charter is a voluntary cooperation between space agencies, and they even explicitly exclude any liability for instance, providing faulty data, which is, of course, one of the legal aspects that comes into play. But then elevating that to a UN level or a level where states cooperate, it would be quite a substantive change. So I'm not sure whether the current charter could be elevated to expand the tasks, as you mentioned, and to have countries involved. On the other hand, possibly the current charter could expand its mandate to not only consider natural disasters, but also pandemics, possibly. But both would necessitate an expansion of the current mandates and probably also the underlying legal documents.
I don't think we've really had time to think it through because it was one of the last seminars we had. So it was like a very rushed meeting on the last Friday. So, we just thought we'd give a flavour of it in our presentations and then maybe take it on to the next level, maybe in the future sometime.
Thank you.
We've also got Justin Martin, who worked on international collaboration from the orbit monitoring team. He can chime in for a few remarks. Justin, over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Good morning. We did touch on that, and actually we had a lot of help from Farhan Asrar. He actually talked to us about this idea. We were able to bounce it off of him. And to touch on the feasibility that you mentioned, we did originally think that the easiest way, the most feasible way, would be to just expand upon the charter. A lot of the remote sensing, satellite observation data that we get that's helpful for natural disasters, a lot of it can also be used and be useful for the monitoring of pandemics. So originally we thought that maybe the expansion of the charter would be the most feasible, as it would just be a change in the definition and maybe a little bit of the scope as to what information data would be provided at what time. The other idea that Farhan proposed to us was a new charter, but with the caveat that it's not a completely new charter, but more it mirrors the existing charter. So a lot of the activation criteria, the space agencies would all remain the same, and it would mirror, all the activation criteria would get mirrored and would be, they would have the same liability stuff, all of the different specifics of how that information would be transferred, who would be able to activate it would remain the same, but it would be specifically for pandemics, as there's a little bit, in our research is a little more tricky, as you touched on the legal part of it, and especially for COVID-19, monitoring using navigation satellites is very helpful, but there comes in the privacy data issues. So there would be some additional details to work out. But from a feasibility standpoint, those were the reasons we talked about those two options.
Thank you. I certainly think that there is merit in the idea and area for further research. Thank you for the clarifications.
Thank you so much, Tanya, for your great question. Lucy, I'll forward the floor over to you for your question. If you'd like to ask our crewmates anything. Lucy?
Yes, hi, greetings from Montreal, Canada. So to all of the crew members, thanks for this incredible and exciting journey. It was awesome, and you really deserve congratulations and to sleep as of tomorrow. I have they're general questions, two different headings, if I may. One is, all of the teams highlighted the importance of doing outreach and education. You highlighted how space technologies can help with teleeducation. You also, one team in particular, the one that the last team that spoke about the app to provide journey for children to explore space. I think that's absolutely fantastic, and you probably should maybe share those ideas with some of the video game companies. But anyways, one of the things that is a bit opposing in some of what you presented is, on the one hand, you highlight how space technology can help. You highlight how it supports many of the UN sustainability goals. You highlight that in the medical field, you need greater collaboration outside of sectors. You need collaboration between the space sector and, in this case, primarily the health sector. So when you do outreach activities, if you gear it towards only those who are either interested in space or that you want to orient in space, how do you do outreach activity to people who maybe are not interested in space, but are interested in other types of science or in medicine, and the combination of different sectors? How do you compensate? How do you educate people who maybe don't know how they can work with space? That's my first question.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for that question. I'll pass over the floor to Jeremy to talk about the app a little bit, about where that idea sort of originated from. Jeremy, over to you.
So you make a good point that space would not be an interest to everyone. That's why we changed our demographic for the app specifically towards education. We know for young minds, space is of interest, and that's why it was a good fit. In terms of older users and trying to bring them into what you're discussing, I think it's appropriate that it goes beyond space. Of course, we focused on space-based solutions within this course, but no doubt when you're focused just on educating a older demographic on telemedicine, you would use other forms of education and inspiration to help them, including space.
Thank you, Jeremy. Lucy, over to you again.
Okay, and my next question is, I would say, deals with a heading I would call governance. You spoke about the charter. I think Tanya brought up key points. I'm not going to dwell on that, but you spoke a lot about other UN agencies, UNESCO for education, the World Health Organization, of course, because of its link to pandemics and other health issues. And you also highlighted correctly the increased role that the play. You highlighted companies like SpaceX, for example. So in terms of governance, the UN current structure, there's no way for the private sector to have an input, and yet they are going to be playing a key role. So in terms of governance, how do you get the private sector more involved around the table when you start discussing things like, well, if we don't amend the charter, what kind of other agreement could we strike? How does the private sector feed into this? Again, as Tanya highlighted, the charter is a voluntary arrangement between agencies, but a lot of the data is not going to come from space agency programs, but from the private sector.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I'll pass over the floor to Justin, who did a lot of our talk around Orbit, from Team Orbit, around international collaboration. Justin?
Sure, I'm happy to take this question. So one of the things that I didn't touch on during the presentation, but a recommendation that we did make in the report, it was specific for the charter, but it was the inclusion of more commercial space operators. That there is a lot of money going into that sector right now, and it's expanding at a very fast rate. So we did think that more charter partners such as Planet, who was added in 2018, would be beneficial in order to make those connections and get that data going. So a lot of the outreach would come from that. That was from our original recommendation. But to your point, the charter is optional. There is UN Spider, which has a lot of that information. There is more work that could go into maybe expanding upon that. But in terms of international collaboration, we thought that the easiest way would be the charter. So I would defer maybe if someone else has more they could talk about outside of the charter.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Justin. Shovin has a bit of remarks. Shovin, would you like to add something?
Yeah, Lucy, thank you. Thank you, Hussein, for allowing me. To your first question, Lucy, I have a remark to make. What we believe in that in our team orbit to have felt like, how to attract people, especially who are not interested in space as such. So what we believe that we can start them right from the schools, from the very beginning. So if try to inculcate the habit of thinking about space from the very beginning, probably in future, it may take a decade or two, so that they also have their questions, they come up with nice ideas about space, and they learn to grow interest about space. And for your second part of your query, I have worked on international charter, and from this team orbit also I had opportunities to look into that again. See, as of now, if I today open the international charter website, what do I see? I see, just let me see, flood in Russia, earthquake in Philippines, landslide in South Korea, flood in Sudan, all that. Where is my pandemic? Because we have to take cues from the navigation, take cues from remote sensing, Earth observation satellites, and from the communication. So if I have to integrate all these, then the role of private is quite clear. The moment we open it for the navigation and the communication, the private players also see an opportunity to grow and give their inputs there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, to Shovin. Lucy, I hope that answered your question.
It does, and I just want to make a comment before the next assessor asks his or her questions. I loved the use of poems in the 3 presentations that were made. Poems are a fabulous way of storytelling, and space has fabulous stories to tell, and we collectively need to learn how to do that better, I think. But you did a great job, so bravo, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for your comments. I will pass over the floor to Walter. Walter, it's your turn to ask us questions.
Thank you very much. And also from my side, congratulations to the team. By the way, it shows also that you can do amazing lot of things, even if you cannot be physically together. It was a nice demonstration. As you probably would have expected, I want to come back a little bit to the economics. I heard a few sentences saying, well, the economy has slowed down. But of course, a number of things slow down. That means that you can repeat them. A number of things are lost, like take tourism. We've seen already a bit of slowdown in the space sector. You showed the 271 billion, but it is less than 2018 because there's already some effect of the 2020 fiscal year. So if you take all that together, what is the team's feeling? Is the space economy, has it lost part of its turnover, or has it just delayed part of its turnover? In other words, will the, let's say the 1 billion or the 1 trillion, excuse me, in 2040, will it still take place, or does this ongoing pandemic slow down also the space economy, let's say, irreversibly? So is the space economy slowdown reversible, or because you have to replace it, or is it an irreversible damage? That was my question, and I look forward for your for somebody who has an opinion on that. Thank you.
Excellent question, Walter. Absolutely. So I'll pass over the floor to Janet, who's going to answer this question. Janet, over to you.
Yeah, so I work in the commercial space. I think it's a bit of both. I think it's affected the economy in that it stopped some companies being able to do something, and I think it stopped it irreparably because the market in that area has expanded in the meantime. So, taking into account our procurement regulations that we have in Europe, it's put a different sort of viewpoint on it for the supplier because we were going forward with them, but now we've got to run a competition. They may not win it. So, that's the effect. And then on the flip side, we've had to delay some stuff as well. So I think it's been a bit of both. I think it's kind of killed some projects, but it doesn't mean to say they're dead in the water. They will come back. But I also think that some of the things that we were going to do this year will be delayed till next year. So I think it's had both effects on that from what I can see from my daily working life.
Thank you so much, Janet.
Yeah,
Lucia also has some remarks.
Yes, from our research on literature on in orbit, we noticed that COVID-19 caused a decrease in space infrastructure investment, in the hardware infrastructure especially, but it caused also an increase of 39% in space applications investment. So analytics and business model connected with space application will have an enhanced role to play in the post-COVID world, we believe. Because demand for online platforms, for online services increase. And actually, this increase has brought up the amount of venture capital investment for this during the COVID period. Now, on the long term, I think it will also depend on what will happen with the small, medium enterprises, which have the ones that have been probably more impacted by the delay in launches, for example, and the delay in other space endeavors. So it will depend on the availability of funding, the availability of risk capital to support the small, medium enterprises, and the availability of the more resilient space player, the more established one, to in case absorb those small, medium enterprises which will be inevitably affected by some mortality rate. And that suggests that involvement of space companies, not only established players, but also small, medium enterprises, need to be supported going forward in the long term, and probably that can happen increasing the private participation or the joint venture forms in the space sector in future endeavors.
Thank you for both the answer. I share your feelings. I'm a little bit more optimistic. I compared like car purchasing. People didn't buy cars, but at a certain moment they have to buy cars anyway. So maybe you delay something, but that doesn't mean that you lose completely. Contrary to, for instance, the tourism sector. But you put a finger in the wound and kept it there to avoid further bleeding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Walter, for your questions. I'll pass over the floor to Offer. Offer has a follow-up question. Over to you, Offer.
Thank you. Greetings from Tel Aviv, and congratulations, Team ISP20, for a fantastic job. Well done, as well as your commanders who worked really hard to entertain you. We sent you to the future to take a look at how space industry cope with pandemics, and in your report I was missing the new space sector completely. So new space, is it something that will not be there in the future anymore, or you just abbreviated it under the space sector as is? As a follow-up question, we do see that small companies, small and medium enterprises, regard this pandemic as a tipping point. They either become stronger, they become more focused, or they perish because hard times call for hard measures. So I would like your opinion on this topic and findings.
That's a great question, Offer. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I will pass over the floor to Maria to shed some remarks on new space.
the offer. Thank you so much for this great question. And actually, we do looked into new space, in particular, using new space companies such as SpaceX to provide more launch opportunities. So to actually get a faster access into space. So, for example, bringing more research opportunities on board the ISS, which we can use as our laboratory for different research areas. But for example, we were looking into microbiology research, would be very interesting in case of pandemics as well. And there we thought that the new space actor can actually bring up more launch opportunities as well. With this faster access to space, can open it up to new space players. So basically any kind of company, a pharmaceutical company, could maybe with this faster access and this faster return rate, like if we have more launches, would also mean you can make research over like several months or get it back within the months, which can be used for pharmaceutical or biomedical companies in areas such as also vaccine development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Partha from Crew Orbit has a couple of remarks as well. Partha, if you'd like to chime in and answer Offer's question.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually, new space definitely in the scenario like pandemics, it is very much critical. And thing is that I'm from commercial space, and when the pandemics has started and throughout the world as lockdown started, we are very much worried what will happen. But we found that there is opportunity also. For example, conventional surveying and conventional surveillance system is not there during the pandemics. So what is happening? Government is worried, and at same times, other agencies, they are worried about security of their assets. And what is happening? We found that the space, particularly private space economy, is growing. We got it. So as a result, what has happened? We found that there is in the new space, specifically to monitor the pandemic, there is a requirement of more data. So in the company like Planet Labs, in Planet Labs, they are capturing the imagery daily. Now they have launched a few more satellites, so they are expecting that per day up to 12 times revisit a specific space, so any area can be monitored very properly. So that way, we can take it as an opportunity also, and many company, many private organization, we are able to utilize this opportunity as well.
Thank you for your response, Partha. Offer, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will pass over the floor to Francois. Francois, the floor is yours for a question.
Hello, thanks a lot. I would like first of all to congratulate the team. That was a fantastic work that you've all done, and it was a real pleasure to listen to the presentation and the very interactive way it was presented. Great work, really. Congratulations to everybody. I actually have two questions of very distinct nature. The first one, several of you have mentioned work to be done on the International Space Station or in other microgravity platforms in order to develop research related to cures, to medicine, and that could potentially be applicable on Earth and specifically on pandemics. I would like you to elaborate what type of research, what type of medicine, what type of drugs could be investigated on the ISS or in other platforms to help mitigate and solve the issue of pandemics on Earth. So that was question number one. And question number two, specifically to the last team which presented, the Mars team, where you presented this idea of a new application, a great idea of the overview effect. Could you please clarify the interest of having such an application, how it could help alleviate bad psychological aspects of pandemics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francois, for your great questions. I'll give the floor to Guillermo from, or actually, Julia has offered to answer the question. Julia, over to you.
Thank you very much. I can answer partly the first question. In space, it showed that under microgravity conditions, bacteria and viruses develop, on the one hand, more quickly and more aggressively than on Earth. So we might get a chance to see how a virus can mutate and how bacteria can mutate or progress or evolve before we get the same problem on Earth. It it works for all kind of microorganisms. So there's no specific microorganisms that we could look at unless we get the microbiologists and virologists that are prominent in the leading research on board, because they often have a good clue about what are the most likely zoonotic spillovers that are going to happen in the next decade. They also predicted in 2007 in one of the leading journals that this coronavirus variant is going to spill over. It's just the question when. So since it is impossible to look at all the microorganisms that we have on Earth, we could try and focus on the ones that are already seen or being looked at by the leading scientists. Thank you.
Great remarks. Great remarks here, Julia. Oscar has a few words to chime in. Oscar, feel free to come in.
Yeah, I think I'll address the second question about the overview effect there. So I think it's been amazing to hear from even the astronauts panels over the last few weeks. We've heard first-hand experience of the effects of, well, the overview effect, this amazing feeling of seeing Earth from space and the feeling of unity and just changing perspective that the pro-social behaviors of just having more appreciation for the world we live in and not seeing national borders. I think this is really applicable in a pandemic situation, because in a pandemic you have this isolated feeling where the lockdowns that are imposed, you have a lot of people hiding away in their homes. They're anxious for their loved ones, and they're not able to rely on those same mechanisms that they normally would for relying on their family members, perhaps seeing them in person. And just this feeling that an app is very easy to access, and you can see other people through this app. You can meet them even and just connect with them. You get a feeling that there's a lot more to the world than your current, all you can see at the moment is maybe your bedroom, but you can see through the app there's a lot more out there, and you can really, have comfort in that feeling that there's a big world out there and a lot of people going through the same sort of problems. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Oscar. Really appreciate that remark. Jeremy has a couple of remarks to chime in. Jeremy, if you want to come on board.
And just to follow on with what Oscar said, of course, when you're dealing with children, you obviously have to respect the privacy of that child as well as what their parents want to protect their children from. So you're somewhat more limited in integrating those individuals, those young ones. But as you read the report, you'll see ideas we had to protect that privacy and still have a semblance of that interaction by means of the walks and other things that we proposed.
Thank you, Jeremy. Francois, I hope we've answered your questions.
Yes, thanks a lot. Great answers, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to reading the report.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and asking us. So now I'll pass over the floor to Chiara. Chiara, floor is yours if you have questions for us.
I absolutely do. And first of all, congratulations. It was very impressive work. It was great to see it, especially as I've been following the ISP over the weeks. It's really great to see the final product. Again, congratulations to everyone. My question is about open data. This was a key word that was dropped, and it's one that keeps me busy as well. So I'd like to pick your brains and understand what you guys have done over the weeks to work on this topic. You know, with businesses, there's different possible business models, right? From a sort of public sector point of view, having an open data approach means that the value added comes when you transform the data into information and intelligence. But for companies, selling images is part of their business model. So my question is, have you guys given it any thoughts on how we would, as a community of space-faring entities, organizations, and nations, be really able to implement an open data policy, first of all? And second of all, do you think that the topic is relevant in the sense, do you believe that addressing health would have an impact on whether we can have an open data policy, yes or no? And the third dimension to this is, do you believe that digitalization could also play an impact on whether we can implement a truly open data policy? So that's my question for you.
Excellent question, Chiara. I'll pass over the floor to Maria. Maria, if you want to chime in.
Thanks much, Chiara, for this question. I will try to answer as best as I can. So the Moon team was looking also into that, was on our recommendations, as in particular also space research is funded by partially like governments, either the European Space Agency, NASA, or also national agencies. And we think that then after the scientist has research and would like to publish the data, this should also be then open to the public to also see the international cooperation as well. Let them know what they were searching about. And we thought it would be nice to have like a common global database where basically all the space research is funded by agencies, where the money actually comes also from public entities, from public people, to have this global database. And then you can basically look through that, and pick in particular, if it comes to pandemics, that this data should be made available, so that people will see also what people are doing, and then get this as a global effort in particular, in case there are any pandemic issues.
And Jordi, chime in. You have some remarks.
Yes, hi, thank you for the question. We don't have to forget also the private sector. So basically, there are several, the European Commission, the Earth observation open data policy is being followed very closely. There are several discussions on this topic. And yes, the business model, it's very important to be looked at. So one business model would be, as was saying Maria, maybe let's have data for everyone, which actually can help a lot on the analytics, so value-added services. So offering free data from Copernicus can enable the development of value-added services companies and stimulates the downstream industry. It's true also that open data can limit the market potential for commercial operators offering data, of course, resolutions. Think about Planet or any other new players there. For example, Sentinel-2 data has a resolution of 10 meters about, and so companies commercializing imagery at those resolutions will indeed face challenges. However, many commercial operators offer higher resolutions with different spectral bands, higher revisit, etc. So I think that it's still an open question. There are many, as I said, the European Commission and many others are working on this topic, but I think that in the end, what would be good, it's a mix of both. You can have open data in many cases, and government organizations have to keep on for questions of sovereignty and availability. But also we have to think about a way of making emerge maybe other operators that could bring many new applications, and also maybe they could be able to lower the cost and be more responsive than maybe very large programs. Thank you.
Chiara, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thanks. I mean, I think that there's a lot more to be explored, but I'm happy for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for answering, for asking that question. And it's always critical. And so I'll pass over the floor to Val. Val, if you're here, if you'd like to ask us any questions.
Hi, Hussein, and thanks for having me on. And really great presentations. I really enjoyed it. I've got two high-level questions. The one is on, from a governance perspective in terms of technology adoption and science policy. So a lot of the solutions that have been put on the table seems to be a technology-driven approach. But when we talk about Starship Earth, you have to look at it from a values-based approach as well. Because as a human race, we have different value systems, and trust is a center of that. How do you navigate that values system in trying to push these technologies? The second aspect to this question is around a science policy, because if you look at the efficiency and uptake of some of these solutions, you have to look at it from there's a multidisciplinary approach embedded in it. Not only the science sector, but the non-science, non-space sectors as well. So if you look at it from a systems of innovation perspective, you have different institutions. But how do you get the different institutions to work together? And that's a science policy question. But the uptake during the pandemic also depends on pre-investments before the pandemic. So you have to look at the science policy in terms of what are countries spending with regards to GDP before the pandemic. So how does this factor in terms of the values issues and the science policy issue? How does it factor in terms of technology adoption?
Thank you so much, Val. Thank you. That's a great question from a policy perspective. And I'll chime over to Jeremy. Jeremy, if you want to present your findings.
So it's a good question. We're all different, come from different perspectives. When you think of even a governmental approach, many differences there. You referred specifically to the Starship Earth idea. And that's why, once again, that approach and idea was focused towards even space agencies, as you'll see in the report, because really one common goal of our agencies all around the world is to inspire the next generation. And if that inspiration also tied them together, I think there's more in common than not in the way that we're trying to inspire our young ones looking towards the future. And that was part of our inspiration for, in particular, that educational app. And I'll hand over the floor to others for more in-depth thoughts on other parts of that integration of agencies and governments.
I'll pass over the floor to Rob. Rob, do you have any ideas you want to bring forth?
Absolutely. Great question. So during several of our interviews, we spoke with some leaders in the healthcare and space domain, and they made it very apparent to us that it is difficult to address any issue on a global scale. But one of the underpinnings that has to be in place when we look at values and trust between countries, and again, on an international scale, we need to be encouraging countries to establish goals at a national level. If national leaders establish goals that tie to some of the research we've done, then there is incentive and motivation within those countries to work towards those goals. Without having some of these issues at a national goal level, then I'd say it's somewhat left to chance.
Thank you so much, Rob. Val, I hope, I know this is a lot. There's a lot of work to be done. So I hope we answered part of your question and we can continue to move forward in a positive direction.
Can I pose a second question? I think Chiara touched on it, but there's some elements linked to it. What we've seen during the pandemic is a very nationalized response because national interest comes first. And a lot of what we're talking in terms of applications, data is the core of it. So there's an aspect of data sovereignty versus data sharing. And if you're looking at it from a global response perspective, how do you ensure a global response with all that dynamics at the national level? Thanks. That's my last question. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Val. Rob, if you'd like to chime in.
Yeah, I might need you to repeat that last part. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch it. I heard the part with sovereignty of data and I believe sharing. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, so in the response to the pandemic, we've seen countries respond at a national scale. And solutions that you're putting forward is a response from a global perspective. So you have this dynamics between data sovereignty versus data sharing, which is required for pushing the solution from a global scale. So how do you ensure the global response given that challenge?
Sure. That's a great question, right? And I think one of the areas we identified that certainly needs further work is the aspect of data privacy, right? Whether it's individual data privacy or privacy related to, let's say, national security. However, within those data sets, there's information that can be used at an anonymous scale, but there's got to be a motivation. There has to be a driver for countries to work together. So I hate to be redundant, but I would refer back to my earlier answer where we have to have goals that are established at national levels. We have to have national leadership pushing these goals and working across international boundaries for the well-being and health, of our entire globe.
Thank you, Rob. Andreas, if you want to quickly chime in for your response, and then I'll move the floor over to Pascal. Pascal, you can ask your question next.
Yeah, very quickly. Well, I would like to combine your question with the first one you gave us, and because in there, it's this is about values again. When you talk about national borders that have to be coped with, there is the value of the whole mankind being one thing that belongs together. And when you spoke about values before, I was touched because you said this was a very technology-driven approach that we took. But let me tell you, basically, this is not what I experienced, because what I've experienced in this ISP20 was that we were just one group and there were no nations and there were no borders. And I think this is the solution for many, many problems the world has. And if we can bring space technology to good use on this basis of being one unity, then we will be able to also cope with borders and the difficulties that come from separation.
Thank you very much, Andreas. I'll pass over the floor to Pascal. Pascal, if you want to come in and ask us a question, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I just want to repeat, like everybody, it's a pleasure. I have also glanced through the reports, not completely read them word by word, but I think it's a great work which you have been done and which is really very important in these unprecedented times. I think I'm at the end of the series, so most of the questions have been already asked, and I think the topic without borders has made a very, very important impact here. Everybody had that. How do we actually achieve that? And data without borders, and how can we change it for this time where it is so difficult in other topics? And I don't want to dwell on that, but I think this is one of the main topics which practically was hidden in most of the questions today. I want to come back to one of the aspects, which is multidisciplinarity, and each of the teams have actually presented aspects, how to interact with other communities, how to be interdisciplinary, how to have spin-off technologies into, I would say, areas which are not yet so common for space. And I'm just wondering how will that be approached and how will that be implemented? It's always nice. We always say we want to do interdisciplinary research. I personally do that since 20 years, and I know how difficult it is actually to implement with all those barriers. And this is a topic which comes into every targets every group presentation. And some of them were very specific, health, telemedicine, but how do you actually really want to manage and want to implement multidisciplinary research? When I just give you one example, when you look at climate change, we all know the important role of space and what we all learn in decades of Earth observations and prognosis for the future. But when you read documents, of climate change, space has practically zero role in those kind of documents. It's about hydrogen technology and energy storage and automated mobility and so many things. So how do we actually really are able to implement space in these multidisciplinary projects, which have been addressed in every of the group presentations?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pascal. If I was answering that question, I would say refer to ISU because they do a tremendous job at integrating everything. But I'll pass over the floor to Niels. Niels, if you want to chime in.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I do want to chime in. What we have seen in our research is that this connection is indeed not always as good as we want it to be. Many people do not know, are not aware of the possibilities that space brings. And this is something that we want to improve. And one idea that I and a group of my team members actually want to look further into. We think humanitarian aid can have a lot of use from space data, and we want to look into a way to get that space data analyzed into the right hands. This is where the space agencies can play a role, and also other organizations that specifically have the knowledge of space and that can connect with the right experts. And we happily have seen this also during this program where we've talked with doctors and we've seen how they apply space and they have learned what kind of possibilities space brings.
Thank you so much, Niels. Pascal, as always, lots of work to be done here, as you're right.
I have just one comment, if I may, and that's about humanitarian aid and just all what is happening right now. Also with the charter and so on, there's a lot of actually Earth observation data which are delivered right now, because of COVID-19 to international organizations. So it's actually something which is already happening. And but it should be really formalized but it happens on national basis, and I know DLR has been working a lot with organizations in order to provide data for COVID-19. So on some examples, to hook on some of those examples would be good.
Indeed, absolutely. And always the European borders are not really borders. Everybody in Europe works together, which is amazing. So I'll pass over the floor to Jonathan Clark. John, if you have a question for us, please feel free to.
Hi, this was great. I just so enjoyed the different teams' presentations and the collective spirit that everybody engendered. So one of the things I always like to look at in times of hardship is to look at some of the positive things. And one of the things that would be really interesting to look at from a space-based perspective is some of the things that have improved, such as air pollution, and also to try to just focus on life is about challenges, and resilience is a really important human attribute. And somehow this is something that astronauts have to face, particularly in times when things go awry. And so I look at even though COVID has obviously disrupted the world economy and caused mayhem and also killed a lot of folks, this is part of life on in on Earth and in the universe. And so to me, a big part of it is to try to take those lessons from this and apply it to human resilience. It's not so much of a question as just a really to commend the collective effort of the teams and ISU bringing the world together to solve this specific area also applies, to the future as a species.
Well, thank you so much for that comment, John. And we would love to get some comments from Andiswa. Andiswa, if you've got a comment or a question you can ask, and then I'll take it over to one public question and we'll wrap up.
Hi, Hussein. Sorry, it's Val here again. Andiswa is not here, unfortunately. She had to run elsewhere.
Okay, that's excellent. So we'll take it over to the public questions. So we've got several public questions here. I will try to get to them as quickly as possible. Some of the questions have already been answered. So I'll just pick a question that we believe that hasn't been answered yet. So if the IT team has access, want to load some of these questions. Okay. We're having some difficulty there. So I'll pass over the floor to Su Yin. Su Yin, if you're here, if you'd like to ask us a question.
Hey, thanks very much, Hussein. First of all, I just want to say a huge congratulations to ISP20. I've seen you guys since the beginning and during the program, and I have to say that you knocked it out of the park. So I really want to reiterate other assessors' comments. It's a big challenge to not be able to meet in person. I think it's one of the first ISU programs for you not to do so. But I do think that you all had the 3 I's experience. I really applaud you on inclusivity and diversity of all the presenters today. As you all well know, my interests are in space applications, and it looks like space applications was a really key theme out of all 3 habitat groups. So I know that all of you worked very hard individually as groups, and you probably had very limited time to really come together, assimilate, and reflect on all of your findings. So I just wondered whether you can comment about, for all these space applications, you've mentioned remote sensing, GIS, GNSS, I think things like UAVs, geofencing was mentioned more than once by multiple groups. So can you clarify what some of the main differences and also similarities of applying space applications for all 3 phases of these of the pandemic might be? And what do you think are some key recommendations that you would give to a country or government who is really interested in applying space technologies for looking at the pandemic, such as COVID-19?
Thank you for that question, Su Yin. Lots of different aspects that went into this in relation to remote sensing. If the crewmates want to chime in, Maria, Rebecca, anybody?
Benita raised her hand, I think.
Benita, go for it.
Yeah, so I would just try to answer this question. So basically, since all the 3 teams have used different types of technologies pertaining to remote sensing, GIS, GNSS, so basically all these technologies have been used in different ways in dealing with the pandemics. Like GIS and remote sensing have been used particularly in the monitoring phase of the pandemics, whereas GNSS and communications have been used in the preparedness of pandemics. So these 2 stages have been particularly catered with the space applications. And particularly when we talk about monitoring, we see that the awareness about GIS and remote sensing being put to use particularly for pandemic prevention, monitoring, or preparedness is still less in most of the developing or underdeveloped countries. So the major thing that we can focus on is to create awareness about how these space technologies are extremely beneficial in all the three stages in monitoring of, in dealing with the pandemics, like starting from even preparedness, prevention, monitoring. In all the three stages, these space application technologies are of great use and can always benefit the humankind in a lot more ways.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you, Vanita. That's an excellent response, I think. I just wanted to add, because I know you're running out of time, I just want to add that I think that your team mission for this whole entire ISP20 has a lot of potential for impact. I'd really encourage you to even consider, as what, future steps forward, given more time, and maybe even putting together a policy brief that countries or governments could really look at quite briefly as to how they might apply all these space technologies for looking at the pandemic. So great job, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question, Ian. I'll pass over the floor to Alejandro. Alejandro, if you've got a question you'd like to ask us.
Yes, thank you very much. Just wanted to congratulate all the three teams for the excellent presentation, very interesting and fun. I really enjoyed them. I have a comment and a question. The comment is about the education. Education is critical to ensure that people understand the nature of the disease, the spread and the preventive measurements, using smartphones and space technology to engage most effectively people to raise awareness, improve consciousness. I think it's a powerful tool, not only for the next generation, for inspiring the new scientists and explorers, but also to save lives through the knowledge sharing. This can be done with the app that one of the teams had pointed out. And the question is that, as the reports pointed out very well, in the Space Treaty says that exploration is for the benefit of all countries and for all of mankind. That from your perspective, how these recommendations can be an opportunity to developing our non-spacefaring countries to leverage in the access to data and to better response in case of the pandemics. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that great question, Alejandro. I'll look to Pufa. Pufa, if you want to chime in to answer Alejandro's question. We've only got a few minutes, so I would so strongly suggest to keep our remarks as concise as possible.
Yeah, sure. So thank you. So during this pandemic, actually, as you mentioned, the education for the students is very much important. And of course, across the world, it has to be reached to all. So for that purpose, UNESCO has launched its Global Education Coalition. So where it provides an online access to all different types of learning sources, and it is open to all. So everybody will be having open access to that. And the recent satellite constellations such as Starlink, it provides connections to remote areas to the internet, so that which will provide a high bandwidth, enabling all the students to access, upload or download the content from that online resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pufa. Alejandro.
Thank you.
Lots to dive in, and I'm sure we'll continue to do this as we transition out of this program. I'll transfer the floor over to Mike. Mike, if you're here, if you would like to ask us a question, we've got a couple of minutes here.
Yes, I've got a question particularly for Team Moon. Thank you for raising the idea that in-space research could be useful in pandemic management. Did you look at the possibility that research facilities on the moon in an abiotic environment might be particularly useful for dealing with future pandemics and particularly virulent microbes?
So I saw that Maria was smiling. Maria, if you want to chime in, yeah.
Yeah, can you repeat the last part of the question, Michael? I'm sorry.
Yes. Did you look at the possibility that medical research facilities on the moon in an abiotic environment might be particularly useful in looking at researching virulent microbes?
Yeah, actually, thank you so much for the question. Now I got it. So actually, yes, we were looking into just this possibility as basically if we would put like a space lab on the moon for researching pathogens, we could basically put all the risk also on the moon and basically research everything there while protecting the Earth. So we could basically, we would send the astronauts there. They would be in quarantine before and after. So before they go into the space journey and after they come back into quarantine. So we always make sure that they do not bring any disease with them. And we could also use planetary protection and safety measures and protection protocols for this to protect our Earth. And if you would research on the moon, we already said that bacteria is shown to actually adapt themselves to the microgravity environment and even changes their behavior and become, in some cases such as Salmonella, even more violent, and therefore even it mutates faster. And we can then also maybe develop or look into this kind of research faster and see if we can understand the key aspects of vaccine development, for example, in the area of space. And also there we maybe can use UV, or we would, in case some of the viruses can be very dangerous, we can also expose them then to vacuum. So maybe there would even then like die, or in case you would do it on the ISS and you would so you can basically protect the Earth using also the planetary protection protocols.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we sincerely apologize on my behalf and duration of the time. We couldn't get to public questions, but we hope that we answered your questions in respective of some manner. And thank you so much for watching us. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I'll pass over the floor to G2 to wrap us up and take us into the next phase of our mission. G2, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hussein, and thank you all very much, all the teams. This is amazing. I mean, I cannot be more proud, to be honest, at this point. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, actually, I want to announce this actually brings us to the end of the final academic deliverable and the event, the final event of Expedition ISP20 in the academic context, which is the team mission presentation. So I would like to once again express my sincere congratulations to all our crew members, but not only, but also their supportive commanders and officers for their amazing work, which is really surprisingly just happened in 5 weeks. I well know how hard you have all worked virtually and across the time zones, which was even harder for the last 5 weeks to make this possible. I hope that each of you is really as proud as yourselves, which you truly deserve, I should say. I also want to once again thank our team mission sponsor, Lockheed Martin Corporation, and all the experts who joined in with their questions today. If you ask a question over the YouTube channel, don't worry, those questions are all recorded and will get responded in the upcoming days. With that, as the Expedition ISP20 captain, I hereby declare the success of our team mission. So it is now time for you to come back home. The 86 crew members of Expedition ISP20, please now sign off from your respected habitats. Please leave them in good condition. For the crew of Expedition ISP21, and board on your ascent vehicles or re-entry capsules if you are on the team orbit. Your journeys will take around, looking at the clock, around 2 hours, less than 2 hours, and we will be waiting for your re-entry back on Earth at ISU at around 5:45 p.m. UTC. So All the crew members, buckle up and enjoy your rides back home. For our guest experts who are with us today, please switch to the second Zoom room that you have received also in the chat, where you will meet with our team mission officers and commanders, and you can discuss your feedback regarding the presentations with them for the upcoming half an hour. And finally, for all our followers on YouTube, we will be also streaming the re-entry of our crew members live. So please now take a break, have a drink, have some food, but please come back and tune in. Our re-entry live stream will start at 5:30 p.m. UTC. You have slightly more than an hour. Again, please tune in to isunet.edu/live and watch the re-entry sequence with us. With that, ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain G2 and signing off for now from ISP Mission Operations Center. May the health be with you.
Thank you.